Hello, and welcome to Press F to Discuss, a podcast about playing video games and talking about them for too long. I'm Jared.
And I'm Matthew, and today we're going to play... Well, actually, we played 2 days ago.
We played recently.
For part of our research about this show, we played a game called Flower.
For part of our research, we did a comprehensive...
thorough analysis, and I read the Wikipedia page for Flower, which is a video game by That Game Company. It was released in 2009, and it is a PS exclusive, so I had to go out of my room to do research for this game.
Yeah, it's really rough. We had a whole thing with...
We tried bringing up the PS3 to my room, but it didn't work.
Yeah, it's rough.
So, it's like an artsy game. It's by the same team
what genre would you call this?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I would say it's an art game, a la The Path and Journey.
I guess, but that's not...
It's more accessible, I think.
Well, yeah, but that art game is not a particularly useful, label, because, art game also means,
any game that you think...
Like that one Tale of Tales game where you walk into a cemetery and there's a 5%...
No,
the one where you walk... The
graveyard.
You walk into the graveyard and there's, a 5% chance that the lady you're playing as sits down and dies, and then you don't get to finish the game. And
in that sense, I guess Deadly Premonition is an art game, because there's, a 5% chance it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But...
We're playing a thing where you play as the wind.
Yeah. And you can control little petals of flowers and collect more and more of them, and then you fight the inevitable decay of your nature by industrialization.
Sure, something like that. Or maybe, I don't know, it's not super clear.
Do you play as the flower or as the wind? I thought it was the flower, but the wind makes much more sense.
But you start zoomed in on the one flower, so...
Yeah, and I mean, you're controlling the wind moving the flower, so I guess I just assumed incorrectly, I guess, that we would be playing the flower.
Yeah, maybe. So a little bit of context for those unaware. That Game Company is nobody knew who they were, and then everyone knew who they were for a bit, and then they didn't make a game for 5 years, and everyone forgot again. They have these. They make these cute little really pretty games to look at. They're experiences. Everyone knows them for Journey, but Flower is pretty solid too, and they just make these unique art experiences, I guess, which
right.
is
And that's where art game comes from. But you're right in that.
I know, but art experience sounds like such a pretentious term.
Yeah, I guess you could put it towards an experimental game.
Yeah, sure.
But you're right in that it's not necessarily super useful descriptor on its own. So I guess, I don't know, instead of saying all the things that it's not.
Yeah.
Like
anyway.
we said, you're a flower. You're floating along in the wind, and there is some narrative structure to it.
Yeah, you float along, you collect other flowers, and then you eventually fight back creeping metal pylons and stuff like that, which doesn't really do the game justice, but whatever.
Yeah. It's got, it actually reminded me a lot of Botanicula, with that same kind of creeping dread, but...
I never played Botanicula.
That's the Machinarium guys. But,
I played Imaginarium, and I don't remember anything about it, so... Yeah. Anyway, so
one of the things that I thought actually was interesting, and didn't really strike me until now, is the fact that... So you start in a valley.
Right.
That's the first level, and the second level basically continues along that trend. I think you move into more
that's the
enclosed
windmill, or is there another one in between?
Or maybe it is the windmill, is the second. But either way, I didn't really consider that the windmill is, I guess, sort of the first sign of that creeping industrialization that comes along, the mechanization.
Yeah, there's a neat narrative to the game. Okay, so before we get too in deep into it's a bit itty bitty parts of the game, what do you think about it overall?
So I tend to be very receptive to these kinds of artsy games.
Bonus points if it's unapproachable.
Yes,
or obnoxious.
the more obtuse, the better. I think gaming especially is being a relatively fresh medium is at risk of sort of getting stale, because it pushes a lot of pleasure points in our brain. And then, as a result, it's pretty easy to exploit that. But whenever games try to buck that trend of making not necessarily an accessible game, but a game that's extremely accessible,
requires different kinds of
right. You make it something, as long as you make it something different, I think that's where games can really shine by directly taking that experiential nature. So I would say, I enjoyed Flower. I think. I mean, the controls for me were super weird because I guess I've like never held a PS controller.
I mean,
before.
the whole like weird accelerometer thing that they have
Right.
going on
I
is
think
very-
it might have been a little limited by its technology because like the end result is that sometimes your controls feel a little too floaty, which I guess since you're the wind makes sense.
yeah.
But all told, so I would say it was pretty good. I tend to like artsy games that delve a little bit more into like a narrative structure than I think Flower did, but considering they didn't use any words or any humans, there's still a lot of really interesting stuff in how they convey positive and negative emotions, freedom and entrapment, and sort of how you combat that as a quote unquote player in that world.
Yeah, I like the game affair not as much as Journey. Like Journey rocks for a number of reasons that like I think Flower has a lot of similar qualities, but Journey has like a step up in its multiplayer thing. But like Flower's just a I just thought of a comparison. Like all of our 0 listeners are gonna give me shit for this.
Oh yeah.
So like I feel that the feeling that Flower attempts to replicate is that of a 3D Sonic game. I'm not kidding.
Okay.
Well, like the idea being that
Actually, the whole narrative actually is very similar, right? Like it's Dr. Robotnik is mechanizing like the forest.
yeah, he's the one controlling the pylons.
And in both of them, you do play a blue hedgehog, so there's that too.
You have to zoom in real close, but there he is in the center of the wind. But yeah, it's like it's a game about like joy and motion. Like there's lots of like it's supposed to feel good to simply like move around and like
you flow, which is actually another that game company game.
Huh,
but-
sick reference.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a it's a genre that I wish existed more. Like games that are simply about how fun it is to move and like
Yeah, I mean, I guess there is like the whole runner genre or subgenre, I suppose, of
Yeah.
like the Cannibalt-esque games.
yeah, and this isn't that far from that. Like the way that it's all designed to like give you a direction to move and make it feel good to just go forward. Like
Right.
little lines of flowers that glow and pop as you go by them, and like give off little jingles. And
Yeah. The tactile feedback is great with the vibration in the controller. Sonically, there's sonically. There's
Audioly?
aurally. It's
Yeah.
like AUR, but I don't know how to pronounce it. So, the tones that the flowers give off are usually very kind of sonically pleasing.
God, now it just sounds like you're talking about the hedgehog.
Yeah, Sonic is sonically pleasing. You get the more of a rhythm that you can get into, or I guess not even a rhythm, but just sort of momentum that you can get, where you're just moving and you're able to flow. The more the game kind of pleases you with how it responds.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that segment. It comes immediately after the windmill, where you're like diving through like cracks and chasms and stuff like
Yeah.
that, carried along by the wind, and you don't ever really want to stop, and it's just like it's just viscerally pleasant. So this is something I've thought about in terms of like how games like that are structured. So there's no fail state, right? You can like fuck up a whole bunch, but like
Yeah,
you can't die. But the punishment comes from like taking away like that joy you feel in movement, which is neat. Like just it's confident enough that like it's fun to move around in this universe that just the sharp jolt of like stopping is enough punishment to
Yeah, and I mean the game. I'm trying to remember. Do the falling towers that comes before the puzzle part where you have to like, well, not puzzle, but you have to hit the red flowers at the bottom. Before that level,
yeah
of the towers,
the tower-
there's a falling tower segment. That's
Yeah.
sort of like where I think the game starts ramping up that antagonism, so to speak, where initially this is just like another part where you're just like flowing. You're trying to just flow as fast as you can, and instead you're starting to hit all of these unavoidable falling pylons, I guess.
Yeah, collapsing pylons.
And every time you hit them, you get like a sharp jolt and you fall off course a bit, and you're trying your best with these kind of floaty controls to avoid that, and just the game keeps on hitting you again and again and again and again. And then finally, the level ends, and that's when you get then into like probably, I guess, the most oppressive level in the game.
You get to the part where you can't move freely at all for fear of like getting shocked and jolted, and
Right.
which is neat. Like,
so instead of flowing around these open landscapes, you're confined to your individual little the squares underneath these pylons, where there's a collection of flowers you have to carefully target without hitting all of the rumbling, broken electronics around you.
yeah, like it's not like it doesn't blow your mind or anything. Like that bit where I had to slow down and pick up the flowers was like best moment in any video game narrative. But it's neat in that, like, I think even now, as people are starting to experiment, there's still kind of a scarcity of like desire to tell a story directly through like game mechanics.
Right.
And like even something as small as that, like that feeling of entrapment of having to slow down and be constricted by ugly industrial growth is neat. It conveys to you the feeling that it's trying to create without saying like this is bad.
Yeah.
Like this is ugly.
The flower felt entrapped by the encroaching.
Yeah, there's not
industry.
a cutscene or something where I mean, not to shit on cutscenes in general, but
Yeah, but it employs the strengths of games as their own medium to take feedback from, or to give the player feedback such that you can frame an emotional response around them. I mean, functionally, it's the same effect as how you frame a shot in a movie. You can have it like really wide open and free, or like really close in on somebody and personal and raw, and it's kind of the same thing. It's all about exploiting the medium to best serve an emotional purpose.
yeah. So, question then: what do you think about the actual story? Like, do you think it's? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, as much as you can get of the story. I mean, I would say it's relatively typical, and that's where it's weakest.
Yeah, it's kind of cliche.
Yeah. And so it's kind of nitpicky to be like, oh, I didn't like Flower for the story. But it does take a relatively standard,
Well,
like
yeah, not the
nature-
story, but like the arc of it. I
Right,
guess.
yeah. I guess the narrative arc of it is it takes a relatively standard, like, nature is good and free, and then suddenly, like, buildings and...
I mean, not even all buildings. Just ugly...
these ugly, oppressive buildings come, and those really suck. But then finally you can kind of like break free of that, and suddenly it's all good again. There's just not really a ton of depth there, which, given the constraints of having a non-human, non-speaking, sort of anti-game game in a sense, where it's like you're not getting any of those traditional storytelling means, it's still a relatively impressive feat that they managed to convey all of that pretty effectively just through music.
Did you say storytelling memes?
Means.
Oh, okay. I was very confused.
No, that game company is not a meme company, I think.
You've only played one of their games. How do you know?
I read their Wikipedia
Maybe
page.
Journey's a friggin' meme fest.
Yeah, maybe.
God.
Reddit likes it, right?
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, neither do I.
And,
What about you? What did you think of the game? Because you had played this a long time ago when you got Journey.
right, yeah, I played it. Well, I played it because it came with the Journey Collector's Edition. I bought the Journey like twice because it's a good friggin' game and you should play Journey. But so this is something I've been kind of reflecting on. Breath of the Wild came out about a month ago, and that's kind of got a similar thing going. I mean, Breath of the Wild has a story, but there's also like something else just in the gameplay. Like the sense of freedom and exploration is like it's not a narrative as such, but it's like I promise this wraps around, but it's like a way of evoking emotion without having a traditional narrative. And I think Flower kind of does that. Not as well, and it's shorter, but I think it's interesting because it's like the developers are like, we don't really, I mean, we technically have a narrative, but like we want you to feel things and like think about stuff, but we don't want to construct a traditional like narrative arc. And that's I'm not sure I understand it well enough to like say a lot about it, but I think it's just an interesting thing to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should probably preface. I mean, we should have prefaced this, before we started. But now that we're started, we should addendum preface it by saying, like, talking about Flower. I guess we're gonna sort of grade it on a curve, so to speak. Like, we understand that there are limitations to being like an hour-long art video game.
Sure.
So when we go in and nitpick it, it's not necessarily being to sort of all quantitatively say, well, I give it a D.
I mean, you can do a lot in an hour.
Right. But I think reflecting on, like you said, like the limitations of Flower's resources versus like Breath of the Wild's.
Right. Well, yeah, obviously you don't compare the two in terms of like manpower or whatever.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I would say it eschews traditional narratives for sure. And I mean, I haven't played Breath of the Wild yet.
We're gonna do Breath of the Wild here. I'm gonna make it happen. Gotta make Matt invest like 80 hours into it.
Yeah, that's the thing. But if I'm understanding what you're saying, it's just that does it have similar themes of like that?
Just in the sense that like the gameplay is its own like reward, like without any semblance of narrative, the way you interact with the world is its own story.
Okay.
Just like, does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess so.
Or do you see that in Flower?
I think I understand what you're saying. I mean, I guess that's what I was saying about like hitting those pleasure points in games. Like when you make a game feel good,
right?
And not just in. I mean, there's a whole nother discussion we had there with like games like World of Warcraft or World of Warcraft isn't which is the game with the microtransactions.
Microtransactions.
I don't know, but any game that you sort of.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Where a player gets like addicted, is that? I don't know.
I mean, people get addicted to World of Warcraft, but it just has regular subscription fees, not microtransactions.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. I don't know, but a game that naturally makes its gameplay feel good.
You can do something with that,
right?
Which is like neat. I think there's man, I'm gonna reference like a billion different games.
Yeah.
But like, I think you can do a couple different things with like how you make a video game, like what your goal is, and you can go like hard narrative and like interface with the player directly, like the recent Nier Automata does a bit of that. Undertale has its fair share of shenanigans, and that's like strict narrative, whatever. But then you can go in a way that's like anti-narrative, I guess, and make a game just based on like feel or something. Like without narrative, a good feeling game can be its own reward. Like,
sure.
I think in many ways that path has been tread more, like a lot more than odd narrative stuff. But I think it's worth talking about like what's the ideal end of games that are like looking to just be a compelling experience. Is that too far off track?
I mean, I don't know. So you're saying remove narrative altogether, where your concern is.
Well, I mean,
to see a story.
You don't have to do one or the other.
Oh, right. But you're saying in this thought experiment.
Yeah, like a game that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think in that case, then a compelling game is something. I mean, like along the lines of a Metroidvania, maybe, or I think like you've described Breath of the Wild, where it's like you accrue these skills and over time build up a skill set or equipment set, such that you finally can beat the game by combining some or all of those skills in such a way that when you started you weren't able to do. And that's how the traditional structure of
well,
a
that
game
too, but just like I guess so
existed.
But just like a game that you inherently enjoy existing in the world or something. I don't know. I'm losing
the thread.
Yeah, losing the thread a bit. My point is just that like even in absence of a narrative that is particularly strong, this is kind of compelling. It's not my favorite game in the world, but I think it's interesting.
Yeah. I guess talking about like the idea of having that movement and then constricting it, it makes me think of like, it's actually, I guess, almost like a gameplay cliche by now, but like a first-person shooter where you like build up a really great weapon stock and then they take them all away, and you have like a little like stealth segment where you have to build up your cachet again. It's like that same idea, right? At the core, where You give the player some kind of gameplay freedom.
Yeah, and then the story is conveyed in the way that it takes
Right.
the stuff away from you.
Right,
And that's all of Flower.
right, that's like Flower takes that cliche and zooms in on it entirely and focuses on making it feel good instantly, and then
Right, but I think the neat thing is that it's
restricting
not
it.
like a specific thing, like, oh, I lost my sniper rifle. It's
right.
like,
Instead,
I
it's
lost
just
my ability to move freely.
It's just an entire sensation and mode of travel, I guess, or mode of playing, so to speak.
Yeah, it's you lose your understanding of the moment-to-moment gameplay, which is
Right.
neat. Like,
Yeah, not a lot of games have the freedom to do that because like they're too big to where you can't like suddenly restrict all of these fundamental axes along which a game functions.
yeah, you have to basically orient your experience around taking that stuff away.
Right. And but because Flower is so hyper focused on this one little experience, that's kind of its strength, I guess, is the fact that it's so fundamentally mechanical, and then
Yeah, everything about it revolves around like
Right.
this one, like
flow mechanism.
experience of
Yeah.
being in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that kind of like sums up what you were trying to get across with like Breath of the Wild.
Yes, yeah. I will have many words about Breath of the Wild whenever that happens, but
It's not gonna happen.
it's gonna happen. We're gonna do Breath of the Wild and Nier and Undertale and all these.
And Grand Theft Auto 5,
We are gonna do Grand Theft Auto 5.
that might be a little bit less fun.
I
But
feel like we already talked about that in a previous episode, and then we come off repetitive. Whatever.
that's true. Yeah, man. So I don't know if that kind of
Yeah.
if there's anything else we have to say about the game.
Not really. I just I don't think there's a ton to dig into. It's not super complicated. It's just like
Yeah.
pleasant and
Yeah. I will say it's interesting in that it's not just automatically like industrialization or what have you is bad, because there are, like you said, like good buildings.
yeah, you're not destroying the city. You're making it beautiful again at the
Right.
end.
And I think that actually is,
Spoilers for Flower, I
Yeah.
guess.
and I think that's one of the ways it was a little played a little short, because I think had you chosen to introduce some kind of human component, not necessarily even like that you interact with them, but like because you're framing this entirely in the abstract metaphor of beauty as like a concept,
Sure.
you lose kind of a degree of relation that you can establish with a player.
Yeah, this is not this is not a town where people live. It's just
Right.
like
It's just a place where buildings are.
right. Yeah.
And there are like so many other ways to content. Maybe that's why they didn't do it, because there's like so many other ways to contextualize emotion with people that maybe that kind of expands beyond the scope that they had looked to accomplish.
Right. Yeah. It's there could be more to it to
Right.
make it more impactful, but mostly it just exists as a neat little like experiment.
Right. And that's what I guess art games really often tend to be at the end of the day.
Yeah, just like look at this cool thing you can do.
Yeah. Either a deconstruction or.
I mean, in many ways, I feel like a lot of these ideas went on to be focused on and made to something compelling in Journey, which I enjoy a lot, and we will probably talk about. But it's like I don't want to say like a tech demo, because it's more than that.
Yeah, it's like it's a mini game. It's a mini narrative. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. It's just that there's a limitation to how much can you do with 1 hour
Right. Yeah.
of gameplay, so to speak. I would say it's not like you say, it's not like a tech demo, because it really is fully fleshed out in what it seeks to accomplish.
Right, but it's just like it's a tiny little like
Right, it's a snippet
examination
of
of one thing.
vertical slice of.
So, do you have anything else?
I think that's it for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's Flower,
Yeah,
or as I like to call it, Flower.
go out and play it. I think it's on PS4. We played it on
Yes,
PS3.
it is. It's PS4 and also PS Vita for
Oh yes,
all you go-getters.
for all you people, just blow the dust off your Vita and
I wonder how that would work, because like you're looking at the screen, you're going to be tilting, right?
Yeah, that seems-
Presumably, I'm pretty sure the Vita.
that seems kind of obnoxious.
Well, anyway. I
Yeah.
mean,
Anyway, so yeah, that'll do it for us. Thanks so much for tuning in. Next week, we'll be talking about laser-based capitalism simulators. This has been Press F to discuss.